Morning, everybody, as you're joining. Another speaker spotlight Monday, which is we look forward to them ourselves, actually, to be honest. It's a great way for us to get to know our speakers a little bit better and what's happening and what their current topics and trends and visions and goals are for the for the period ahead. So it's good to have you all with us again. So today, yes, but Alexander Leibner. Alex has been in the media for pretty much most of his life, and was actually a customer of ours a few years back. I remember him very well. He pretty much ran most of. He was with ABN News, sort of head of marketing, but part of his portfolio was to run all the events for Forbes and CNN across Africa and into the rest of the globe. And he was quite particular about the speakers, like a lot of you on the call are. I recognize some of you, and I know, he wanted speakers with an edge, somebody a bit different, and so he would constantly challenge us to get the right speakers for a lot of his events, and then eventually kind of joined our stable and became part of the USBI family across the globe. And I have to say, he's just an incredible guy to work with. I'm really encouraging you all to book him a lot more. His MC and facilitation skills are second to none. I mean, they are next level altogether. But if you think about it, he's been running events like you. He knows the challenges. He also has the Santon Media Group, Santon Times Media, where he basically knows the who out there. Because he's in media, he's extremely well connected and very clued up with what's going on around the country. So you have the added advantage, of course, of booking him, knowing that you're safe in the knowledge that when you've got panel discussions, facilitation, scenarios like that Alex knows how to do it, how to take it forward. It's what he does. He's got podcasts, radio interviews. He focuses on the Santon business area. And then over and above that, he's got a fantastic talk. He's a kind of a futurist, a vision ahead, and what to look forward to in various trends, and very knowledgeable. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Alex and take us away.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for that introduction, and welcome to everybody who's made time to be on this call. Or if you're watching this at a later stage, well, welcome to you, and thank you for taking the time to watch this, and also hopefully get a few things to take away from. And I think to build on Paul's introduction, I'm going to give you a couple of additional maybe facts or some interesting bits and pieces. As Paul indicated, I'm a future thinker and a digital media maverick, either by self-declaration or by imposed declaration. But either which way, one of the two things I really enjoy focusing on is media. As Paul mentioned, I've been in the media for most of my life. I think it's about 25 years now. I started when I was 16. But also, as part of that, and I think as you kind of evolve in any kind of business or any kind of industry, you start looking more and more into the future and looking at kind of where your industry is going, and then also how does it affect other businesses that you're in. One of the things that I spend a lot of my time doing, apart from running a digital media business, is doing talks. As Paul had indicated, one of the talks that I've done the most is called "The Shift Has Hit the Fan," which is very much a focus on the future, very much a focus on trends. And the great thing about this talk is that even though it kind of carries the same title over and over again, the actual content of the talk is constantly changing, because it constantly looks at where are we at right now, and it gets customized to each industry that I address and that I speak to. Another interesting thing that I've also found myself doing, and this is also based on an elaborate television career, but also having been in the event space, as Paul indicated, is that I also MC a lot of events, be it awards. This is one that I did in Turkey last year. This was a conference that I did in Turkey last year as well, where we had about 400 of the world's leading event organizers coming together and discussing all things event related. And that's the great thing also about having that sort of hybrid experience, is that you kind of understand what's happening in the background. So you can kind of forecast in your own mind. If things are not working the way they should, if there's something that needs to be changed, extended, moved around, that's there as well. I also have the pleasure of moderating and emceeing a lot of corporate events. Based on the field that I spend a lot of time in, most of these are tech related or AI related or IT related. I've recently done something for IBM as well in Southeast Asia. And then also coming back to my work, I get a chance to travel a lot around the world. This was a trip that I did to Hong Kong last year, and there's been numerous other ones as part of my media work. And this also gives me constant exposure into what's happening elsewhere in the world. And having that constant exposure gives me a chance to kind of compare where we at as South Africa, as Africa, compared to where's the rest of the world going. And if you visit some of the world's greatest cities, you get an idea of kind of where things are going and kind of what can we learn, what are we doing better, and so on. If this is sort of sparked some interest, I encourage you to pull out your phone right now, put down your cappuccino, your latte, or your double scotch, and just scan the QR code on the screen. It'll give you more information about the Sandton Times and the different platforms. I do a weekly radio show and a weekly podcast as well, and you can have a listen to that. It won't have too much to do with the future, but it might give you some good recommendations on your next holiday or good places to go and grab a bite to eat. Coming back to today's talk, one of the golden threads, or the golden thread that I have that go through all my talks, is the word shift. And it's about shifting your future, shifting your tomorrow, shifting your thinking. It might be shifting your business into a different gear. It might be shifting down. And these are the things that I unpack. And I'm going to try and keep this thought and this golden thread in this particular talk today as well, which is really a tidbit or a boutique version of some of the things that we talk about. And if I could kind of give this talk almost a little bit of a subtitle, it would be Control, Alt, Innovate. So how do you reboot your thinking as you go into a new week? And hopefully it'll inspire you to take some ideas forward into this week or into the winter months. And as you prepare for spring and summer, it hopefully sets you up for some new ideas before we close out 2025. This is a great quote by Alison Berman. She wrote an article, and it says that today the future is unfolding not linearly, but exponentially, making it challenging to predict just what will happen next and when. And that is so true. I think a lot of you will be experiencing that right now, is that things aren't happening in a sort of a chronological way. They're actually happening in leaps and bounds, to the point where you think, but listen, a few days or a few weeks or a few months ago, we were here. Why are we suddenly here? And how did we miss that? And there's actually an interesting gentleman called Chamberlain. So Chamberlain, who first coined this phrase, "May you live in interesting times." And I think it was Robert F. Kennedy who then made it a very popular phrase. But "May you live in interesting times" is certainly, I think, where we are at right now. I think at some point people also considered it a bit of a curse. If you say to someone, "May you live in interesting times," because people are probably going through these times right now and thinking, do I really need to live through this? Like, is there anything else that you can pile on to my current existence? We don't need more interesting things happening. But "may you live in interesting times," I think it can also be a very encouraging phrase, because I think who would want to sort of just live in the predictable? To build on this, Ray Kurzweil, who's a very well-known futurist, probably sort of the doyen of futurism as well, and also looking at where things are going. He was quoted to say the rate of change itself is accelerating. And if you think about that, change was happening at a certain pace up until a point, and even that change is now accelerating at such a rate that I found myself emceeing and moderating a client event. And we were talking about AI in some of South Africa's big corporate companies. And I was expecting all these CTOs and CIOs to be putting up their hand and saying, we've all got AI. Everyone's got some sort of AI. And surprisingly enough, out of a room of 100 people, I probably found one or two of them had actually implemented some sort of AI officially into their companies. Now, this obviously discounts any other people in their offices just using AI on their phones or maybe having some sort of chat GPT running on their laptop. But it shows you that even though we talk about this all the time, the actual reality on the ground was that a lot of companies were still very hesitant to take that next step. Now, if you think about how long we've been talking about AI for, it almost feels like a lot of people are behind the curve. And this is where I think this rate of change accelerating is so clear. One thing that you would have probably heard about a lot in a lot of these talks, and this is actually a stat that was published by Dell Technology, is that 85% of jobs that will exist in 2030 haven't been created yet. And it's always interesting to throw these things around and kind of say, yeah, well, I'm sure they said that 10 years ago, they said that 20 years ago. Like, really? And I thought, let me go have a look and see what jobs had been created just in the last 5 years that hadn't existed before those 5 years. So you've got Chief Automation Officer. This is somebody who obviously looks at how a lot of this technology is integrated into companies. Virtual Influencer Coordinator, Metaverse Architect, Quantum Computing Analyst, Space Tourism Guide, Climate Adaptation Specialist, Zero Waste Consultant, AI Content Creator, and AI Career Counselor. And these were jobs that hadn't existed 5 years ago. Now, you can imagine we've got another 5 years to 2030. What else is going to still come up in this world? And I'm going to quickly stay on this entire concept of AI, because what credibility would this talk have if we don't talk about AI for at least a minute or two? And an interesting thing that's currently unfolding, I think, in the background, and for those people who probably have kids or kids that are going to university, AI is writing the homework. It's also writing the assignments. Interestingly enough, AI on the other side of the coin, or the other side of the page, is being used to grade the homework and these assignments. So all that's left is for AI to really just go to class and sort of basically run the world. But we say that flippantly, but it's quite incredible how this is now evolving, and how universities and schools are battling with the fact that their students are using AI to create a lot of their content and create a lot of their writing. But at the same time, that same school, that same institution is possibly also using the AI to actually do a lot of the work, which also begs the question, like, at the end of the day, what are we actually left with once all of this has gone through those processes? But it gets even more funkier. So if you don't have kids and you can't relate to this, let's take it one step further. AI is also managing recruitment, and job seekers are using it to land roles. So it's really the age of algorithmic hiring. And I'll put this into context for you. I have a friend of mine who was looking for a job not so long ago. So she started sending out her CV to a whole bunch of companies, and she wasn't getting any responses. And she looked at her CV and she went, but I've got this experience. I've got this, this degree. I've gotten all these things. Why am I not getting these jobs? And then she got really smart and she started doing some researching. And what she was realizing was that the companies she was applying to were using AI to filter out the CVs. So they were taking the job description, they were looking for keywords and key statements, and then the AI was basically imposing that onto the CV and saying, if these things don't appear on the CV, I'm going to kick it out, even if it is, because it couldn't, there's no gray area. It's either, it's binary. It's either 1 or 0. So if it wasn't the exact phrase or the exact terminology, it was out. So then what she started doing is she started taking the job description and using AI, started upgrading her CV to use the correct phrasing and the correct terminology according to what the AI system would possibly be filtering for. She ended up having 5 interviews in 1 week. I mean, within 12 hours, somebody got back to her and said, listen, we got your CV. This looks great. Can we have an interview? And she landed a job in, I think, 2 or 3 weeks at a big international company. And that just shows you that not only do we have to not worry about unemployment or joblessness in South Africa, we have to worry about the fact that even if those people try to apply for a job, they might not be getting it because the AI is now filtering out, their CV or their documents. And this is just something to kind of keep in mind, because, and this is once again a phrase that's been used extensively, but it was also something that was coined by Harvard Business Review, that AI won't replace humans, but humans with AI will replace humans without AI or AI knowledge. And that's why it's so critical that we get on top of this as part of our digest going to 2030. To give you a practical example from the world of media, this is an article that was published in Forbes earlier this year, and it's about how news sites, digital sites, be it websites, are experiencing the sudden drop in web traffic, because more and more people are using platforms like ChatGPT and OpenAI and all these other different things as a search engine. So essentially, they're typing in their request, great places to eat in Paris, or things to do in Cape Town on my next holiday, and the software is scrolling through the internet and bringing back the information. So that person, as in the past with maybe a Google search where it would come up with a website and you'd open 15 websites and you'd start reading through it, that process isn't happening anymore. So what does that mean for that industry when suddenly their core audience is disappearing because of technology? So really, what's key to any industry, to any business, is to remain relevant, not reactive. Because I find that we often only kick into gear once the horses have bolted. How do you remain relevant? And I believe it's that a lot of people follow tech and they think that, well, if we get a lot of more technology involved, we're going to be innovative. And I don't think it's got anything to do with tech. I think it's got something to do with mindset, with having the right system design and having the right culture in a business where that culture, that design, that mindset is constantly driving you to be innovative and not just sort of leaning on technology. Because you also get a lot of companies who have every technology under the sun and still not performing because either the things are not integrating or everyone's just leaning on the technology to make things work. So really what you need is you need to have human-centered businesses, you have purpose-led businesses, and you need to be systems-driven. And I think if you start focusing on these core things, you're going to start seeing the things happening on a different level. The technology in these things will only sort of enable and they will help you to scale it and they will help you to operate it. But at the end of the day, the core of it needs to be clear. And to give you an interesting example of innovation in a company. So Lego in the early 2000s was having a horrible time. And they were at a point where they were even thinking if they're going to shut down the whole place and pack up the bricks and move on. And one of their leaders decided, well, you know what, there's a great opportunity here to actually maybe open up the design of Lego boxes to our audience. What do they want to get? So they created Lego ideas. And if you're a Lego enthusiast like I am, maybe to an unhealthy state, you can actually go onto Lego ideas. You can register a profile and you can pitch your ideas to Lego. So you can say, why don't we do this set or that set? Or I've got an idea about, something that, there was one guy who's just recently had his set published, which was all about exotic birds. And the amazing thing around this is that if the set receives 10,000 votes from the Lego community, Lego actually takes it into research and development. And if they go ahead and actually publish that set or bring it to life, you get a percentage of their global sales on that set. Now, that's pretty remarkable. And I'm sure that's a handsome sum. But also, what Lego discovered was that they suddenly brought out sets that they would have never thought of doing, like the Beatles' Yellow Submarine and NASA's Apollo Saturn V. And yet, when they did bring it out, they were doing incredible revenue and incredible results. Another interesting shift in terms of innovation and changing pace is you're seeing more and more luxury goods going into hospitality. So this is from the Louis Vuitton store in Paris. They have their own cafe, and they're now serving Louis Vuitton cappuccinos with a Louis Vuitton chocolate gâteau. You're going to pay a little bit of a price for it, but it's interesting how suddenly a company that was known to do handbags and clothing and accessoires is now going into the hospitality space to such an extent that they're now opening their first hotel on the Champs-Élysées in Paris next year. And this is what it looks like. This is just the facade. So instead of having scaffolding, they decided to put it all in a big trunk. But the final hotel is going to be quite fascinating. And you're seeing this with a lot of other luxury brands as well, how they're opening up coffee shops. They're opening up these experiential things. And it's quite funny at the coffee shop because they've got a little retail store. And you're not quite sure if it's a retail store with a coffee shop or is it a coffee shop with a souvenir shop afterwards where you can pick up a Louis Vuitton scarf or they even do a very cool Louis Vuitton chocolate spread, which you keep not for anybody when the body corporate comes for lunch or for breakfast. You keep that for your special friends or you just keep it for yourself. But, how's that? Louis Vuitton chocolate spread. I love this phrase. I'd love to actually quote somebody on it. I'm not quite sure who came up with it, but it should be quoted. It should be attributed to somebody. But culture eats strategy for breakfast, but innovation culture eats legacy for lunch. And this is exactly it. Is that when you have an innovative culture, it says yes, we've been doing this for 100 years, and yes, we've always done it this way, and there's no other way of doing it. But when you have that innovative culture, it eats up the legacy and it moves forward. And I think this is just if there's any takeaway, I personally think this is the one to take away. And an interesting example around this kind of thinking is that after the COVID-19 pandemic, Delta Airways, also like many other airlines around the world, was experiencing, kind of what do we do next? How are we going to adapt to this new world? And they also got, speakers, consultants, future thinkers, strategists into a room and said, well, how do we plan for these scenarios? What can we do? And they came up with a whole bunch of interesting ideas after this. And they said, cool, we're going to focus on things like sustainability, wellness. And they invested in sustainable aviation fuel, which is now a big trend in aviation. They redesigned their loyalty program. So it wasn't just about miles, but it was also about experiences. They introduced more flexible ticketing policies. So if you had to change your flights, you remember that uncertainty that we had coming out of COVID. If I book a flight, am I going to be able to go? And will it be refunded? And also, they also enhanced things like air filtration systems and obviously creating healthy environments. And with this foresight, they really position themselves for the future, almost ahead of a lot of other airlines coming out of that. And it just shows you, if you get the right people in a room, if you expose yourself to the right kind of thinking and then work together with an innovative team, how you can actually keep your business relevant before it actually goes, out of business. And relevance is a practice, not a position. So a lot of people, kind of sit strong and they're kind of almost like a castle in the Scottish Highlands, not going anywhere. But you have to constantly practice to be relevant. Relevance isn't something that stays forever. You have to be constantly evolving and constantly keeping ahead. So if I can leave you with a question maybe to ask yourself as you come out of this talk, what is one behavior, one mindset, or one system you need to change this week to help your team stay relevant? And really think about this. And I think we don't spend enough time sitting back and thinking about it. And like I always say, if you're not sitting back and thinking about where your industry or where your business needs to go, your opposition is. And that's not a great place to be when your opposition is thinking 5 steps ahead than you are. As I leave you today, I'd like you to remember that the future isn't waiting for you to be ready. It's waiting for you to lead. And you need to take control of where your future is going, and you need to lead it. And you need to be thinking about some of the things that I've raised today. My name is Alexander Leibner. It's been an absolute pleasure to connect with you today. If you'd like to continue chatting, well, I'm on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and look forward to taking these conversations further with you, either through a talk, a workshop, or one of the many other opportunities that we have. But Paul and the team, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'm going to hand this back to you.
Perfectly on time as well, Alex. That's thank you. What a great talk, and certainly you got us thinking, right, for the week ahead, and I think that's also the purpose of these kind of calls too. Could we put you on a spot? Do you have any sort of tips out there for companies that are like all of us that are in the events? I mean, we do have customers from corporate companies on the call as well, but their role within the business is eventing. So we're all about eventing. We're all about trying to do things a little differently. Are you suggesting that we should maybe be open to having some workshops, perhaps? Get some of our customers together. Is that the sort of the way to try and brainstorm these kind of things, generate ideas, on how we can all become more relevant? Because I'm sure it's on everybody's mind, right?
Look, I think it certainly is a first step. I think the one benefit you have in terms of being in the event space is that I think it's become incredibly relevant from a communications tool and a marketing perspective, because people are looking for the experience. I think experiences have become a bigger currency than anything else right now. It's kind of outdoing a lot of other sort of traditional channels. And it's quite interesting. I often attend the PwC Entertainment Outlook report, which always looks at the next 5 years. And one of the highest growth media, and this blows my mind every single year, and every single year I debate it, is cinema. And I keep saying to the guys, but why cinema? I thought the movies were over. Like, we've got streaming, we've got all these things. Like, why are people still going to cinema? And he says it's down to the experience. People like the idea of going somewhere with somebody, sharing the experience with other people, eating the popcorn. It's that whole multi-sensory feel. And I think that's potentially an opportunity there, is to say, is the event just an event like we've done it pre-2020? Or is it something where there's more of an experience? Are we thinking of all the senses? Are we including the scent and the touch and the taste and the whole feel of everything? And I think that's potentially where a lot of event organizers are maybe coming to a bit of a T junction, where they kind of have to now decide which way they want to go. Are they going to keep doing what they're doing, or do they want to try and reinvent something? Another interesting thought that I had quite recently, and I was actually looking at doing a bit of a piece on this, is applying Maslow's hierarchy of needs to the event space. And I know this seems very academic, and it seems like, something that somebody that an MBA would throw out there, but it's really down to, if you had to go through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I think especially in the South African context, it's things like safety, fulfilling yourself, all these kind of things. Does your event tick all those boxes? And if it doesn't, maybe that's the reason why you're not getting the results, you're not getting the responses, you're not getting the buy-in, because there's a lot of interesting things in that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, even though it's an ancient model, that really do apply to the event space, I think. And it's something definitely worth reviewing. But maybe that's just a couple of thoughts, Paul, to throw out there and give it some thought. But in terms of the workshop, I think there's definitely, I think, some scope to explore that as well.
Oh, well, thank you. Look, I mean, whenever we talk to because we're very passionate about trying to create more experiences, through our speakers. But the event managers themselves have got sort of access to a bigger pool of magic, if you like, and where they come unstuck a little bit is trying to influence some of the stakeholders who have this kind of, as you say, legacy vision, or this is the way we're doing things, and they're not. So it's almost like they should be bringing you with them. They should be booking you, Alex. And then, but I mean, if they did book you, you would be open, would you, to perhaps coming into some of those strategy meetings with them to try and just create something a little different. It's what you talk about, getting the company to become more relevant to their audience as well, of course. So
yeah. I think what also helps a lot is to have somebody who's looking at it from the inside out, or from the outside in, because often you're so caught up in doing what you do on a daily basis, and you're coming out of one event, you're going into the next event, and it's just it's like a relay, right? I mean, it's just a constant turning. To have somebody who actually looks at it from an outsider perspective, but also who has a peripheral vision in terms of what's happening in the greater scheme of things. And I used to always say this to my events team, when we were still producing these high level events for governments, for big corporates. I used to say to them, look, we're not competing with our own event that we did last week. We're competing against the event that our guests went to yesterday. And it could be a BMW event, it could be a Capitec event, it could be whatever. They're now comparing us to the last event they went to. And if it was an incredible event and they really went all out and they took a lot out of it, they're not going to say, well, these guys are great, but they did that event like 2 years ago, which was really interesting, and we're going to compare it to that. No, they're going to compare you to the next brand that they were working with. And that's unfortunately the constant innovation that you have to now bring into it and say, how do we be remembered as that event that people went, wow, I went to so many events this year, but that one really was different or unique. And I think that's something that a speaker that plays maybe in the space that I play in can bring to the table, as opposed to just being sort of a talking head, or just sort of ticking a box or reading a script, kind of bringing in maybe a little bit of that strategy as well, and a little bit of that, even if it's just thought-provoking questions. I mean, at the end of the day, you're not going to bring anyone any answers, but if you can ask the right questions, it might just spark, the right process in terms of maybe adjusting and getting things going in the right direction.
Well, thank you, Alex. Thanks for a great talk this morning, and thanks for your insights, and thanks for always wanting to make things better for our industry. I'm going to hand you over to Kathy now, but as always, great to see you.
Paul, always. Thank you so much.
Sorry, my mute wouldn't come off. I just want to ask a quick question before we end off. When kids or university students use ChatGPT, isn't that sort of taking away from their natural knowledge or anything like that. I mean, you're just kind of punching in something, and then this ChatGPT just spits anything out to them, and then they use that. So they're not really applying their minds.
Yeah, look, it is a bit of a challenge. And I think it also comes back to, I mean, it's not something that we haven't gone through before, right? I mean, I think when a lot of us went to school, and I don't know if you remember that the teacher always used to say, don't use a calculator. You need to like sit down with your pen and paper, and you need to work out, your times or your plus, and you could do it on paper, and you go, okay, 5 + 2 is 7, and then you always had to hold something over, and then you can kind of. So we all know how to do that. The fact that we all now use a calculator to make it easier because we don't have the time or the energy or the interest to do it on paper. Is kind of the same thing now with ChatGPT. And you look, in the media space, I can tell you right now, I know that there's a lot of writers who are using it to either prompt a thought, help rephrase something, help start an article, or maybe refine an article, etc. But what a lot of international media are calling human in the loop. So it's having that human touch to it still having somebody who reads it as a person and still has influence over it and still can tell you if the grammar is correct or if the phraseology is correct or having that control. And I think it's going too far the one way, which is the danger, where you're literally just typing in stuff, copying and pasting things, and you actually don't know what you're doing. So I think there's still a lot to be said about knowing the fundamentals and being able to do it with or without the technology. Having the technology will help you do it faster. It'll help you do it maybe at a different scale, or especially if you're doing stuff that is quite monotonous, being able to maybe do it or spark an idea of doing it in a different way. However, I don't think it can be like a replacement for everything that you do. I think that's kind of where the danger lies, is that you end up having people that if they don't have this, they just can't function. Then it's the end of the world, like full stop. You have to be able to fall back to, call it the good old methods of writing or reading. Or I mean, there was one interview on the radio the other day where the lecturer was saying that students are using these platforms to summarize entire books. So, instead of reading the chapter on, I don't know, advanced heart transplants or whatever, you're just sort of getting the summary version. And I'm starting to think, I'm a bit worried about somebody who's only read the summary and maybe not the entire chapter on that. And that's because there is also there's a learning process that your mind absorbs the information when you sit down and you actually summarize the chapters yourself on paper, maybe with highlighters or however you do it. But the ritual of doing it is actually almost more important than than just the knowledge that's absorbed. And I think when you use a lot of this technology just seamlessly, and then obviously then there's all the other issues like copyright and plagiarism and all these other things, and that's also something you have to be very guarded against, and it becomes quite difficult to kind of monitor that or check yourself if you're working on the kind of scale that these systems are pushing out information. Because I mean, you can type in give me an article on whatever, and it gives you 10 pages. Now, how are you going to check 10 pages on where that came from? And I mean, I know there's more and more development in terms of creating sources and where the things are coming from, but it becomes quite tricky. And also, you can hear immediately if somebody's put something into one of these platforms and is just reading it off there, because they have very similar phrases or very similar ways that they sort of spit out certain things. So having that human touch and being able to say, cool, okay, I get what you want to say. Let me try and see if I can rephrase that in the way I would have said it or the way I would have put it. So yeah, I hope that sort of answers the question in one way or another.
Yeah, that does, definitely.
Okay.
All right. I don't know if anybody else has got any questions or if we should end off now. No, I don't think so.
Quite a few comments, but no questions. So
all good.
Sure.
All good comments, definitely.
makes my life easier. Great.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. That really was insightful. I mean, I think a lot of people don't realize how many new jobs there are out there, and they probably feel that they're going to be replaced, or just have this sort of negative feeling about things. But there is hope. And then I also remember, when we were at school, we didn't have these chat GPTs or anything, and we had to actually go and read it up in an encyclopedia and, like you say, summarize from there. So things have definitely changed.
Well, look, the other difficult thing is as well, and I get this from an education perspective, is that things are happening at such a pace that if you have to sit down now and create a curriculum, send it to whichever regulatory body has to approve it. That takes another, I don't know how many months or how many years to get that approved. By the time that course is implemented, by the time you've gone through that course, let's say it takes you a year, 2 years, 3 years, that information is now 7, 8 years old. I mean, unless it's like the fundamentals of something, there is actually no other way of actually dealing with this stuff except for educating yourself and actually diving in there and starting to use the things and I don't know, hire your local 17 or 18-year-old nephew to give you a crash course in some of this technology to kind of stay ahead, because it is just evolving at such a pace. It is very difficult to try and stay on top of it.
Definitely. Yeah, sometimes I do call my son in and, please just help me here. I don't know how to do this. So it is definitely having the teenagers or the Gen Zs and all of those, it really does help. But thanks again, Alex. And thank you everybody else for joining. We have Larry O'Connor next week, who talks on inspiration. So that's next week at 9 o'clock again. Thanks, everybody. Okay, bye.
Thank you.